Which dead celebrities are treated like saints, but were truly awful people when they were alive? No one will say it, because Americans have a hard time grappling with the military not being heroes, but Chris Kyle was a racist and a liar. Ray Charles made children all over the place and refused to acknowledge them. Jerry Lewis, he treated his family like shoot, cut his kids out of his will and was a real boss on set. Watch some clips on YouTube of him and his behavior. Terrible. Most likely stemming from when he and Dean Martin split from being Martin and Lewis. Everyone thought Dean would disappear and Jerry would go on to be a massive star. As it turned out, it was the complete reverse. He was a bitter person. Bing Crosby, father of the century, physically and mentally abusive to all his kids, alcoholic, adulterer, slimy businessman. Check it out. Frank Lloyd Wright. He is seen as a visionary in architecture, but he was a horrible person in real life. Raging narcissist. Abandoned his wife and kids to run off with the wife of one of his clients. Nailed down his selected furniture in a client's home because he didn't like what the client wanted, etc. It's probably come up time and again, but John Lennon was not a nice man. His son grew to despise him enough to tell Paul McCartney that he wished Paul was his father. Coco Chanel, revered fashion icon and also Nazi sympathizer. I haven't seen Michael Landon's name come up yet. He did amazing on Little House on the Prairie, but apparently he was actually a raging alcoholic and even his own kids made a documentary about the father I knew. I feel like Cosby is as good as dead and would have been beatified if he had died before he got caught. Jimmy Savile, absolute monster. His celebrity as an English radio and TV personality gained him unrestricted access to hospitals with disabled children whom he abused. That's putting his life very lightly. Beware if you go on to read more about him. My mother, who was a young adult during Bing Crosby's peak, said that he was a horrible husband and father, a serial philanderer and violent. Bing Crosby. Years ago, while watching Blue Skies with him and Fred Astaire, my dad gushed over Astaire's legacy. I asked what Bing was like and he said, besides beating his wife and kids, what a voice. Can't watch anything with him in it now. He was a monster to anyone close to him. Johnny Carson. He cheated on his wives and was an all-around prick when he wasn't on camera. The most widely known example was him telling Joan Rivers that she'd never become the star of The Tonight Show. She was the permanent guest host at the time, then refusing to ever speak to her again after she got a job elsewhere. Jimmy Savile. Until after he died and everything came out about the bad stuff he did. Big pun. His kids and widow freaking hated him. He pistol whipped his wife in front of his children and broke her face. By some Stones fans, Brian Jones. He deserves to be honored for his role in the band, and for his musical contributions, and it's a shame how his life ended, but he also had a history of domestic violence. Reading all these things, is there anyone who wasn't the worst? Didn't U.S. Senator Ted Kennedy once kill his assistant while driving? Pablo Picasso was an abusive, raging narcissist who sucked the life out of people around him. His muses were generally young women he dominated and destroyed. How soon until Woody Allen dies? Can we just include people who are really old and long past their sell-by date? Since no one mentioned them yet, Simone de Beauvoir and Jean-Paul Sartre. In her letters, de Beauvoir mentions several romantic and sexual relationships with female students of hers. In one case, she met a 17-year-old student who she had a relationship, and later introduced her to Sartre, who also began to have sex with her. There were a few others who basically made up Sartre's personal harem, while de Beauvoir acted as the pimp, seducing teenage girls into threesomes with Sartre. Additionally, both were signatories of a petition to remove the age of consent laws in France. The petition was written by a known pedo, Gabriel Matzneff, and signed by other French intellectuals including Foucault, who himself has been accused of sodding boys. Lou Reed. I love the Velvet Underground, but many of the band members were awful. Frank Sinatra. My grandpa's girlfriend and her husband used to work for him, and he was a right bastard. Didn't think that he had to pay people that worked for him, treated employees bad, all the usual human stuff. Frank Lloyd Wright abandoned his wife and children to take a mistress, who was herself already married. He drove his butler insane, and the guy ended up killing Wright's mistress and her kids, burned down his studio, and committed suicide by drinking acid. Wright wasn't there at the time. Wright's response to this was to rebuild the studio exactly as it was before, supposedly to honor his mistress and their children. But it was pretty obvious to people at the time that he just wanted to protect his legacy as an architect, as many of his most famous innovations were showcased in the design. Sure enough, it became the museum to his work and is still visited today. I've worked for Prince, and it's a not-so-hidden secret he was absolutely awful to work with. There used to be a saying, you're nobody in this industry until you've been fired by Prince. He's a legend for sure, but was awful to those who put the show on, and his ego was out of control. And when it came down to it, he died from an OD. So for someone who was so quick to fire anyone over a simple mistake and he's so critical of weakness, it turns out he had some hidden weaknesses of his own. Also, from all accounts, Jim Morrison was an awful person. Salvador Dali was a fascist that beat women. Patton and MacArthur were pretty shoot people too. Kirk Douglas. It's an open secret in Hollywood that he sexually assaulted Natalie Wood. Kandinsky fled Germany and let his artist girlfriend stay and hid his and other greats' art so they couldn't be found and destroyed by the Nazis. She was an artist herself and was in danger, as well as would have been killed if the artworks she was hiding were found. He hid in Denmark and, instead of returning to her, he had forgotten he had a girlfriend, who risked her life, and got married to someone else. To make things worse, he decided to steal his ex's style of abstract painting, and this is where his work started to get recognition. Paul Allen. Anyone that has a not allowed to look at me policy in place for his own arena staff is kind of a dong. Sonny Bono. Massive prick before he passed. Used to hang out and play Sega at his house with his kid. He's not dead, but didn't George Lopez cheat on his wife that gave him a kidney by hooking up with some call girls? About 60% of them all. Most people don't get to the top by being nice, but there are exceptions. Thomas Edison. Literally one of the biggest pieces of shoot. Stole patents, stomped out competitors with physical force and violence, electrocuted an elephant to mislead the public his inferior power grid was less dangerous than Nikola Tesla's, and a lot more. Maradona. I love my football, but goodness, he was a terrible person. Elvis. He was with Priscilla when she was 15. I think it's probably safe to assume they were having Shreks. Steve Jobs was an a-hole to his family. His own kids hated him. His wife only stayed for the money. He also was known for throwing work colleagues under the bus to cover his own ass, and taking credit for things he didn't invent. Tom Cruise. Aboard the USS Theodore Roosevelt, he didn't want sailors to even look at him while he was filming aboard their ship. The arrogance gets to me. You're playing make-pretend pilot on an actual warship, but the people actually doing the job and mission you're pretending to can't even look at you? Steve Jobs was a little entitled prick growing up. He had the fortune of great adoptive parents, and when he was bullied, he threatened to drop out of school unless his parents sold their house and moved to a place they really couldn't afford. They did it. He also pulled this "I'm going to drop out" move when he wanted to attend the most expensive liberal arts school, Reed College, yet living down the street from Stanford, only to drop out. He took credit for Woz's design for a contest at Atari and then lied about the prize money and shorted Woz. He then fricked off when he felt like it in between stints at Atari. Apparently they used to joke about what a shoot employee he was and dramatically underqualified for the position he bullshooted his way into. The overarching theme seems to be Jobs inflicted his will on you at the expense of your guilt. It wasn't until that fricker STFU and started listening to others that he decided to turn an iPod into a phone, get off the dong of PPC, and stop making $8,000 machines that public education couldn't afford. He was even an aunt to the mother of his children. But lo and behold, he's a good guy, because he named a product after his daughter? Frick that guy. While he demanded excellence of everyone else, he didn't seem to learn anything on his spiritual conquests to demand it of himself. If anything, he became more of a manipulator. I am from the future, and Chris Brown belongs to this list too now. Dr. Seuss had an affair for years while his wife battled cancer, drove her to suicide, married the woman he'd been having the affair with a couple months later. XXXTentacion beat his pregnant wife as well as a gay man while he was in jail. 1. Stanley Kubrick. Although the way he treated Shelley Duvall during the production of The Shining is widely known, people who think there's nothing more to cinema than what Kubrick did tend to brush it off when they talk about him. He was well known for treating his actors like shoot, but he has been glorified. The glorification is understandable, though not justified, to a point where his shortcomings are completely eclipsed by his popular persona of a mad genius. To Alejandro Jodorowsky is a despicable human being. The guy had literally boasted, on record, of sexually assaulting an actress during filming of El Topo. For reasons I don't understand. Art film bros love to glorify that pus. It's high time we stop glorifying hollow and meaningless mental fapping disguised as deep, cryptic and mystic shoot. I hate saying it, because I used to really like him, but on 2 occasions, Paul Walker dated 16-year-old girls, once when he was 28, and again when he was 32. This was all while he had a young daughter of his own. The age of consent in California is 18, meaning if he did anything sexual with them, he could have been charged and indicted on statutory sexually assault. I guess being a predator is okay, though, if you're really good looking.